Greatness. Something that the Oklahoma Sooners showed the final 8 minutes and 47 seconds of what would turn out to be a 12-point win over their hated rivals from Austin, the Texas Longhorns, and a fourth straight Big 12 championship. Great teams aren't always great. They're just great when they have to be. You probably heard that from NFL films from the voice of John Facenda, Lambeau Field. Yeah, that guy, okay? The Sooners weren't always great in this game. Was the offense always great? No, okay? The Sooners today did not even rush for a high amount. In fact, they had barely over 120 rushing yards. The Sooners today, defensively, wasn't always great, but then again, they haven't been great for a game all year long, except the Florida Atlantic game, which of course doesn't count. The Sooners were great when they had to be after turning the ball over with about 9 minutes to go, clinging to a 3-point lead. That's right, a 3-point lead. Texas has the ball, and if they drive it and take the lead, maybe they win the game. Trey Brown with the corner blitz, which not only gave Oklahoma 2 points and a 5-point lead, not just giving Oklahoma the momentum, but also giving them the ball back. And then the following drive, Lee Morse with a couple of catches, the only 2 catches of the game, but they were both in clutch situations, and Kyler Murray delivering to Calcaterra on the one-handed grab. And yeah, we're going to talk about Georgia in just a second because that is very concerning what's going on as I'm talking to you right now, the SEC championship game. Of course, a Georgia win probably eliminates the Sooners from the college football playoff. But that discussion will come later in the video as we're coming to you live right now. The Sooners were great. Those final 8 minutes, the Calcaterra catch, the biggest catch in his career, sealed the deal. And this was an environment that lived up to the hype, and a game by and large that lived up to the hype. I would probably have to say, even though the Sooner fans were very boisterous, very supportive of their team, you probably have to say that Texas had more fans at this game, probably by a 60-40 ratio, something like that. Texas probably had easier, better, and earlier access to these tickets than the Sooners did. So, but still, it was a great environment. AT&T Stadium, over 83,000 fans. And by the way, I don't know what the Georgia-Alabama attendance was like, but as of right now, the Big 12 championship game today, highest attendance for a conference championship game. So the Big 12 got what they wanted, and of course the Sooners got what they wanted. But if you watch this game early on, it didn't look so good for the Crimson and Cream. The defense at times doesn't look like they're even on the same field with the other team, and that's the way it looked in the early going. Texas got the quick lead, but there were times in which the Texas offense didn't have a lot of success. I know that Ellinger, played one hell of a game, had over 300 yards through the air, had a couple of touchdown passes. I think he had a couple of touchdown runs as well. But there were times where the Sooners brought the heat and were able to stop Texas drives, especially in the fourth quarter with Oklahoma clinging to a 3-point lead and Texas and Oklahoma territory, the Sooners not breaking. And you commend the Sooner defense. They had to deal with injuries, of course, dealing with injuries on that side of the ball with Bolton. I think Murray got dinged up as well. Offensively, of course, you wonder about the health of Marquise Brown. We didn't see him in the fourth quarter. The Sooners did a hell of a job in defending the run. Much better than what we saw in that October game in which Texas got the win. Today, the Longhorns did not even rush for 100 yards as a team. They were largely one-dimensional. Last was Oklahoma, but the big thing was that Texas could not have the type of game they had in October against the Sooners, in which the Sooners' offense was only on the field for 28 minutes. They flip-flopped time of possession. In this game, the Sooners had the ball for 32 minutes. Longhorns had it for just 28. I thought that was a critical difference. Of course, the big difference in this game, and Texas fans will be the first to tell you this, the penalties. Longhorns had 13 penalties in this game. That's right, 13 for 128 yards. Penalties that put the end to drives and kept Oklahoma drives going. Oklahoma was a more disciplined team. Yeah, the Sooners had 6 penalties, but Texas had more than double. And that, I thought, was a critical difference. One of the reasons why Texas failed to win this game. And again, you're talking about Kyler Murray. in the early going, it looked like, he just wasn't in sync. And part of that, you have to give credit to the Texas defense for both being able to contain Oklahoma's run and also providing pressure against Kyler. Because Kyler had guys open early on. He just wasn't hitting them stride for stride. But the Sooners proved once again that you don't always have to be great throughout the game. You don't always have to be great in every facet. You just need to be great when it matters the most down the home stretch in a game that could have gone either way. So you tip your hat to the Sooners, and I'm going to go ahead and answer some of these responses I'm getting on the chat. Yeah, Georgia spanking Alabama. I don't know what the score is. I think it was 28-14 Bulldogs third quarter. Of course, Boomer Sooner to my against weakness. Yeah, Boomer Sooner and Oklahoma's 12th Big 12 championship. Amazing because there was only Big 23 Big 12 championship. If Georgia blows Alabama, does OU get in? I still have a hard time, and I'm just going to say what the committee's going to do. This isn't how I would vote. I'm just going to project what I think the committee would do tomorrow. If Georgia wins today, and let's just say that they win in impressive fashion by 3 or 4 touchdowns, I still think Bama's going to get in, okay? If you're asking me what I think the committee will do, I still think they'll put the Tide in because Bama won all 12 of their games this year. No game was as close as 20 points. And Tua Tagovailoa only threw 3 passes in the fourth quarter all year long. I think the committee, if you're asking me what I think they'll do, they'll look at Alabama's body of work. They were number 1 in the beginning, number 1 entering today, and they would have lost to the number 4 team in the country. It's not like they would have lost to Humpty Dumpty. It's not like they would have lost to a junior varsity team. They would have lost to a damn good team who they played in the national championship last year. So I think Bama's still going to command that respect. If you're asking me how I think the committee is going to go, I think they're going to put Georgia and Bama from the SEC in. Right or wrong, hate it or love it, fair or unfair, I think that's just how it's going to go. And Lloyd just said, it looks like Georgia's – yeah, I think a lot of it, too. I think Bama, not to take anything away from Georgia, Bama knew that they were in the playoff entering today. Remember, Bama didn't win the SEC championship last year. In fact, they didn't even go to the SEC championship last year, and they still got in the playoff, and we know what happened after that. Navy Thomas says, what do you think? Is this win good enough to get over Ohio State, blowout of Northwestern? I would say yes. And I agree with you. Bama is going to get it. I don't see how Bama's going to. I would be shocked if Alabama does not make the playoff, okay? It doesn't mean they'll be the number 1 or number 2 seed. I still think, though, they're going to be in the top 4. I don't think they're going to drop out of the top 4 because of one game. The other 12 games speak volumes. Not just because they won them, but because of how they won them, which was in dominating fashion. What bowl game does Oklahoma get? They don't get in the playoffs. Well, they're contractually obligated to play in the Sugar Bowl. That is if you don't make the playoff. And you'd play an SEC opponent. It'd be either LSU or Florida, one of those 2 teams. And who knows what the mindset would be of Oklahoma a month from now in that game. You know how it is when you're searching for that ultimate game that you're expected to play, in this case, the playoff, you don't get there, and you have to settle for a bowl game of lesser stature. You're wondering what the mindset will be. And you're also wondering, too, if Oklahoma doesn't make the playoff, how many of Oklahoma's players will play in that bowl game? Because we've seen that trend. Ed Oliver of Houston, the All-American linebacker, he's not going to play in the bowl game because he knows that a huge paycheck and a high draft status is awaiting him this coming spring in the draft. Several of these Oklahoma players are going to get picked. And if they know that, they may not risk injury by playing in the bowl game. I'm not saying that's justifiable, and Georgia missed a field goal, thank goodness. Maybe Bama can come from behind, but, man, if you watch that Georgia game, Georgia's been able to get to Tua Tagovailoa. And, by the way, I think the more interesting question, well, a question that's just as interesting, does Tua lose the Heisman Trophy? I don't think so because I think a lot of the Heisman voters have already voted, and I think they voted Tagovailoa 1 and Kyler Murray 2. So unless a lot of those voters have held their ballots, I still think Tua will win the Heisman Trophy no matter what happens today. But the penalties, again, going back to the Big 12 championship game, were devastating for Texas. And the stretch that Oklahoma had, those final 9 minutes, getting what I thought was the biggest play of the game, the Trey Brown safety, because it shifted momentum. It gave Oklahoma the lead again, and Oklahoma eventually cashed in the Sooners with that long 6-minute drive, which resulted into the Calcaterra touchdown. So a great environment today from AT&T Stadium, and for the Sooners, all they do is win Big 12 championships. You're hoping they get a shot at the playoff. If they don't, obviously what happened today was too late. That Texas loss back in October would have been the nail in the coffin. But still, Sooners play with the heart of a champion. So proud of these guys. They find ways to win, and the defense improved, okay? The defense improved. They held Texas to 437 yards. That's a masterful defensive performance, in my opinion, compared to how the Sooners have been playing defense in comparison to the other games. So give it up to Kyler Murray. You give it up to C.D. Lamb for the big game that he had. And by the way, in the losing cause, Colin Johnson played a hell of a game too. Had 177 yards receiving and a touchdown. So Colin Johnson, in the losing cause, did everything he could to try to get the Horns their first conference championship in 9 years. But not to be. Sooners get revenge. Don't forget, I will have my playoff preview show coming up tomorrow. Right now, it's not looking good. Alabama needs to come from behind, and they need to win. Otherwise, you're going to have to hope that Pittsburgh beats Clemson tonight. You think that's going to happen? Oh, my gosh. I'll have egg in my face if it doesn't. Okay, I'll be happy, but I'll have egg in my face because that was one of my locks this week. Pittsburgh getting waxed by Clemson. Clemson's favored by 27. And by the way, on that same show tomorrow, which will be around 11 to noon, somewhere in that time frame after the college football playoff has been released, after that final poll has been released, I'll also reveal the official stats of how the Coin and I did. We finished tied, I know that much, because I won on the Pac-12 championship. I had Washington. The Coin had Utah. So I won on that one, and I was a game behind with the Coin, and the Coin and I agreed on Central Florida, and we both agreed on Clemson. So I'm going to finish tied with the Coin no matter what. The only question is now, what will our final records be? Congrats to the Oklahoma Sooners, overcoming a sluggish start and being great when they had to be during that final 9-minute stretch. 39-27, and yeah, Horns down. And for the Sooners, hopefully a college playoff spot, but that's going to right now depend on Alabama. Boomer Sooner.